all want to hunt monsters. Or wanted to when we were kids. This wish fulfillment fantasy is deeply ingrained in practically every culture around the world, and it's the bare bones of hero's journey realized. Every now and then a video game comes along that manages to catch that lightning in the bottle, which can be summed up as the primordial satisfaction of being a hero hunter. And it appears that the seasoned veterans from Crytek managed to do just that. At first glance, Hunt Showdown is not what you'd call a typical game for the studio that is mostly renowned for the first Far Cry game, Crysis franchise, and a third-person action game Rise, Son of Rome. In terms of atmosphere and style, it's quite glaringly cut out of the cloth of Southern Gothic horror with a healthy dash of Lovecraftian elements. Of course, the dish is finally spiced up with some truly addictive action RPG mechanics. The game is set in the alternate version of the Gilded Age, which mostly denotes the time span of the American history between 1870s and 1910s. At its very core, the very idea of this setting is fairly loaded due to its implications. It was a time of unrest and upheaval, when major social inequality and infrastructural problems were swept under the vibrant rug of rapid industrialization and urban expansion. The problems of the society, as per words of Mark Twain who coined the term, were masked by the thin gold gilding. It becomes quite evident why this very setting was chosen when you put two and two together, combine the sense of anxiety with underlying socio-economic circumstances, which is always good for horror, with an increasingly popular motif of unspeakable, otherworldly horrors and eldritch entities that await behind the veil of reality, and all of that from the pale author that kickstarted his writing career as the Gilded Age waned. It's a match made in heaven and a true wonder that no one tried to set the horror game of such caliber into such environment before. Still, long and winding history of this project and the nature of its inception left many players scratching their heads over how exactly we arrived to the joyous work in progress that we see in front of us today. Hunt Showdown began its life as far back as the first half of 2014, when Crytek USA was tasked with creating a spiritual successor to Vigil Games' Darksiders, with 4-player co-op element added to the mix. After the original announcement of Hunt, Horrors of the Gilded Age, the project went through what can only be described as production hell. Studios were shut down, the property changed hands, it was shelved, reinvigorated, and finally, after the closed alpha, it was released for an early access on February 22, 2018. Technically speaking, Hunt Showdown is a multiplayer first-person shooter with RPG elements, but there is so much more to it than a few refreshing mechanics and an interesting twist on a setting. Let's get obvious things out of the way. The graphics are positively stunning, and every experienced player of Crytek's lauded first-person shooters will recognize their signature application of CryEngine in spite of the unusual setting, which is unlike anything they've ever tackled. Genre-wise, it is a dynamic horror game with an interesting sequence of gameplay mechanics which manage to keep the experience both unique and addictive. And sequence is the right word here, as the player goal in this multiplayer experience is not merely a matter of pitting factions against each other until the last man stands tall. It is simultaneously player versus player and player versus the environment experience that puts several very clear tasks in front of you. These tasks, or if you will goals, resemble a structure of a 3-act story in a very convenient way. Maximum 5 pairs of hunters can enter the so-called arena, the dilapidated and haunting hinterlands of Louisiana, and each team is tasked with finding clues that will lead them to the terrifying monster that is hidden somewhere on the map. Motivation-wise, the pressure cooker is almost immediately near the boiling point for the players because all teams work against each other, and that naturally gives the custom story of your match a breakneck forward momentum. The goal of this first act is to find the monster before any of the other pairs do, and even though this creature is the main prize of this feverish bounty hunt, it is definitely not the only abomination in the field. Grunts, hellhounds, and malformed beasts abound in the world of Hunt Showdown. Once you take a moment to inspect the designs up close, it becomes evident that the developers of the game have gone out of their way to create the most vile, fear-inducing creatures imaginable, putting a special emphasis of fears of disease and infection. This, of course, will definitely not prepare you for your first encounter with the boss if you're a newcomer to the game. The temporary version of the game boasts only 2 boss monsters, the Butcher and the Spider, but the two surely make up for that with their panic-inducing appearances. Now, the most effective way to describe the Butcher is to compare him to an overcranked version of the humanoid pig monsters from Amnesia 2, but with even more visceral, emancipated appearance. It is fairly tankish in its nature, and it lunges at the players with the force of an unstoppable freight train and a fiery hook from the depths of hell. On the other hand, the Spider is the second unique boss, and it is generally an agreed upon consensus among the players that this Stuff of Nightmares is the biggest inducer of sheer panic in all of gaming right now. This is not only due to the fact that the meaty creature resembles a pus-filled version of the spine-tingling member of Animal Kingdom, but also because it's blindingly fast, twitchy, and it can crawl across walls and ceilings. Now seriously, if you tend to be freaked out by the frantic movement of cockroaches, then this particular boss will make you jump out of your seat. Still, once you finally find the monster, you are pretty much committed, panic or not. The goal of the second act is to kill the boss, but this is when the midpoint turn in your match's storyline happens. After the creature's death, the pair of hunters that have brought it down are now tasked with banishing it from the earthly realm. The process is excruciatingly slow, and it can essentially turn into a defend the flag sort of arrangement against other players. This is due to the fact that it becomes significantly easier for other hunters that partake in the match to locate your whereabouts and eliminate you in order to snatch the bounty for themselves. The gameplay element known as Darksight, something that all hunters in the game have, plays a significant role when it comes to this. It is a supernatural power that lets the player see into the invisible world which exists parallel to our own, and as they gleam through this veil, discover a variety of useful things. For example, they can use it to discover clues at the beginning of the session, or to uncover the location of hunters which are responsible for downing the boss. For now, this is the most overt thing this game has to an overt Lovecraftian element in the game, water snakes notwithstanding. The elements of the story are quite vague, so it's hard to discern how the power of these hunters, the presence of the veiled world, as well as the origins of the monsters are interconnected. But lore fanatics around the world are already searching for answers feverishly. For those of you that are interested in the world-building aspects of Hunt Showdown, there is a number of very intriguing marketing pieces and media bits you can track down online, including the captivating letter of John Hayward, the deceased hunter from the game's world. It all points to the mystifying way the gameplay elements, bounty hunters, the hunt, and the banishment have some sort of underlying logic behind them, but it is not required knowledge to enjoy the game, of course. It is simply there as an option for those of you who enjoy such peculiar matters. The bounty itself is tied directly to the successfully performed banishment, so the intensity of the game does not let off even after you've killed the boss. Since you are one step closer to the final goal, the experience becomes even more stressful. However, it doesn't mean that you will necessarily be on that side of the match. In fact, it is a perfectly legitimate strategy to let another pair do the heavy lifting before you venture out to snatch the bounty right from underneath their noses, right after a cold-blooded, well, showdown. Finally, after the banishing is brought to a close, the pair of players that has collected the reward rushes to the extraction point. This is the third act of the story, and as you race towards the extraction, your advance can be hindered by other monsters and players in pursuit. This is the section when the hunter becomes the hunted. This progression sequence and the emotions it arouses echo what the gaming community has already experienced with Soulsborne games of From Software, especially the first Dark Souls game, with its deliberately distant bonfires and locked teleportation system during the first act of the game. A pursuit towards the goal is replaced by the thrill of the victory, but then, the player faces almost unbearable uneasiness as they need to reach the safety point with the burden of the reward on their back, a reward which they can easily lose along the way. The parallel between Hunt Showdown and Soulsborne games became even more clear after you learned that the price of death in this game is very steep. Indeed, should player characters in Hunt Showdown succumb to their wounds, the death is permanent. You lose all the painstaking leveling choices and weapons, as well as half of the experience points which you have earned during the last match. Thankfully, you still get to keep all of your cash you have earned as a bounty hunter. Such as it is, a game where you are placed in the shoes of a hunter of supernatural beasts against the backdrop of distinct historical Americana that runs parallel to the Victorian Age in the Great Britain, Hunt Showdown is undeniably similar to From Software's Bloodborne. However, it is fair to point out that the game still manages to stand out as its own kind of beast due to the rich intersection of gameplay mechanics. Now, before you click the dislike button or rage quit the video, I am not saying that the team which worked on this game borrowed certain elements from Software's majorly successful franchise. I am just stating that From Games cast a long and imposing shadow over the whole industry, and the ripple effect of their influence is both irrefutable and here to stay. Now, the developers from Crytek are not as merciless as it might initially appear. Even though the death of the player character is permanent, the option to retrieve half of your XP and earned money can make a world of difference as you begin to build a new character. These so-called leftovers feed into a special tab on your account under the moniker of Bloodline. The surplus currencies from the previous characters compile, which grants you the opportunity to purchase better gear for your following avatars. Since the gear consists of available arsenal of weaponry and consumables, this can significantly shift the odds in your favor as you plunge into your next match. The player can have up to 5 active hunters recruited at the same time, an element that has slightly reminded me of the Darkest Dungeon and the way you, as a player, serve as the patron and manager of a group of hunters, even though every similarity beyond this and distinctive Lovecraftian horror elements are virtually non-existent. If you do not have any money to purchase a hunter of your desire, you can always settle with the basic hunter build, which is free, and through the process of leveling up, you can bring him to the tier of apprentice. The hunters are available in 3 tiers: apprentice, cowboy, and manhunter. If you're starting off with the basic hunter, when one considers the factor of permadeath, a strong argument can be made for quick in and out sessions, where you would abandon the goal to pursue clues and boss monsters completely for a new small fry kills to boost your XP. Nobody would blame you for it, as the sense of danger in the game's environment is so effectively palpable, it literally oozes off the screen. Every new masterful piece of multimedia art does not actually reinvent the wheel. Instead, it splices the elements of previously established milestones in its respective medium in a refreshing and unexpected way to create something truly special. By combining the elements of Left 4 Dead, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and numerous Battle Royale games into the well-worn framework of Lovecraftian spiritual influences, top-notch Crytek FPS mechanics, and lofty engine capabilities, we are graced with Hunt Showdown, a truly distinctive game that is so much more than the sum of its parts. Each of the carefully chosen cogs click together in a satisfying way to create an immersive, high-risk, high-reward, ultimately intense action horror experience that taps into the primordial corners of our brains which yearn to don the role of the hero hunter and embark on a journey that balances the feelings of empowerment and challenge. As most such games tend to roll into the spotlight even with the rocky beginnings, the gaming community seems to have noticed Hunt Showdown, and with the unstoppable ripple effect only the age of the internet can muster, more and more players are joining the hunt. So, what are you waiting for? Rise up, dead men, in the name of two, bound by blood. Let us drink from the fountain of death. Here's to the hunter, here's to the hunted.